Hi, everybody, this is A.R.S.E, a Random Starter Explains, and today we're going to talk about Atlantis and the three possible sites that I discovered in my research. So the first site is probably the one that there's the least evidence for, which would be Antarctica. The Piri-Reis map, which is a map that you'll see right now all over, YouTube and the internet and stuff like that, shows that uncovered or de-iced Antarctica, and it basically showing the land mass that's underneath all the ice. And the Piri-Reis map was drawn like in the around the 1500s, early 1500s, I think. And the man that drew it said that he used older source maps. The thing about Antarctica being uncovered by ice is it would have had to have been based on a map that's roughly 11,600 years old or older, because of the documented pole shift that happened at the same time, the Younger Dryas event, the 15-degree pole shift that moved Antarctica from the tropics to the South Pole, basically. That so that site might be a possible one, because the Mexica or the Aztecs, in their origin story, which I think is 12,800 years ago, or 12,800 years old, I mean, and is a reference to the Upper Dryas event in the comet that hit the Pacific Ocean. Like I've said before, it's the goddess Sedna from the Inuit tribe in Alaska. They talk about a goddess that fell into the ocean, and I think that's a reference to the comet that caused the Upper Dryas events, roughly 12,800 years ago. I think that's what's referenced by the Mexica or Aztecs when they talk about the feathered serpent and the snake. So the snake would be a representation of the Milky Way, and the eagle eating a snake would be a representation of the comet passing through the Milky Way as it struck the Pacific. The Central Plains Indians in North America, or Central Plains indigenous people in North America, talk about the Thunderbird that flew over and brought destruction with it. And Icarus is also a reference to the same comet. South America people, or the ones that live. If you guys have seen the movie with the balloons and the old man in the house, that area of South America between the Amazon and Peru, where the mountains, the Andes, and the cliffs and all that stuff. So, or the Amazon basin, I guess. There's a lot of rock art that's now been dated. Well, recently 50,000 years, but there's a lot that dates to the Upper and Younger Dryas period, where they mark solar eclipses, stars, and the like calendars, and they all date to the solar eclipse. Anyways, is dated to 12,800 years ago, the Upper Dryas event. The significance of that solar eclipse would be that it revealed the comet that struck the Earth that caused the Upper Dryas event, meaning that the people on Earth didn't see it because it was on the other side of the sun, and so they only saw it once the eclipse happened, and then that revealed the comet, and that's where we get the Icarus story from, flying too close to the sun and falling to the Earth. So that would, like I said, so that's Antarctica. Antarctica, by the way, though, the shift that I'm talking about didn't happen until 1,200 years after the Upper Dryas event, and that is the Younger Dryas event in about roughly 11,600 years ago, and referenced in other mythological stories like Norse mythology, Mayan mythology, and a few other people from around the world. So, like I said, Antarctica moving, I guess, from the tropics to the South Pole would have been the Younger Dryas event. So that's a possible location. So the second location would be somewhere in North America, like the New Mexico or Four Corner area. And like I said, because the Mexica or the Aztecs talk about how they walked to Mexico City from Aztlan, which is very a similar word spelling to Atlantis. And so it's possible they could have walked from further North America, which would have been affected by the Upper Dryas event more than the southern hemisphere because of the mini ice age or the glaciation that occurred in those intervening 1200 years between the Upper and Younger Dryas. So, like I said, so we have Antarctica, North America, and then you have the Azores and Bimini Road, which are both in the Atlantic Ocean, which I think might have been a related site if they either one of them were the site. Then you have the Eye of the Sahara in the Western Sahara, heavily researched by a man by the name of Jimmy Corsetti, and this is the site I think that was destroyed by the Younger Dryas event, and it's possible it could have been related to the Atlanteans, I guess, or the people that existed pre Upper Dryas in North America or in the Americas, and that spread their knowledge post Younger Dryas, the 1200 years after the Upper Dryas and the Younger Dryas events, to the rest of the world, as detailed in the Handbag of the Gods by another remarkable gentleman by the name of Graham Hancock. So, the site in the Sahara sits near the Atlas Mountains, and Atlas is the mythological first king of Atlantis. It also sits near the Atlantic Ocean, which my whole life nobody's been able to tell me why the Atlantic Ocean is named the Atlantic Ocean. It just is what it is. And that, of course, is even more similar to the word Atlantis, as it's only off by one letter. And then you have the fact that the Western Sahara used to be more, or have like a more of a more water, I guess, present, or there was like an inland sea. And so those three sites, or four sites, I guess, would maybe even five, because the Azores and Bimini Road are pretty far apart. Possible locations for Atlantis, and I think they date. They could be even the same civilization, like I said, that moved because of the Upper Dryas. You have the whole northern hemisphere, um, you know, basically become or fall under the ice or become covered by ice. And then, like I said, so you maybe the people that were living in North America, like the Clovis people and other indigenous tribes, because there's now evidence of people being in the Americas for a lot longer than is accepted by the Eurocentric isolationists. So, like I said, those people might have been around. They moved south. Then you have maybe they rebuilt a city or they moved to another city. Because another story about Atlantis that I've heard, another fanciful story, was that there was 10 connected cities of Atlantis, that they were a worldwide civilization, and they had 10 total cities, which is possible. And then you have the site in North America, which would have been under ice after the Upper Dryas event. And the least affected of the sites would have been the Sahara site, because it's in the southern hemisphere and on the other side of North America, away from what would have been the strike area in the Pacific for the comet that caused the Upper Dryas. So the Younger Dryas event, which was the solar flare or solar plasma event, which eventually led to post-water event B, which is the raising of the sea levels 400 feet. That event is detailed more in the Mayan tale of the four worlds, or their origin myth, and it, I think, was the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, for the Atlantean civilization. Like, they survived the Upper Dryas event, tried to rebuild in the intervening 1,200 years, and were finally, you know, or their cities, their civilization was finally decimated by the Younger Dryas event, which was a lot more destructive, I guess, than the Upper Dryas event. If it entailed everything that has been thought to, that it has been thought to have, including the plasma solar event, which would have charged the Earth with the with lightning storms, a pole shift, and the melting of the glaciers causing post water event B, raising the sea levels 400 feet. So all that combined, plus the stopping, well, when the pole shifted, the Earth stopped spinning, causing a supersonic windstorm. Which, if you want to know, like how or see what would happen during a pole shift, there's a great book called The Adam and Eve Story, which was written in 1966, that describes what would happen in a pole shift into the modern world. So, like I said, so whatever the civilization was that existed pre-Upper Dryas or antediluvian or pre-diluvian, I guess, would be the same people that probably survived and tried to rebuild, and then were finally, their civilization finally eradicated with the Younger Dryas event. So yeah, so like I said, those are the three possible sites. I didn't even mention Herodotus getting his story from Atlantis from the Egyptians, because a lot of people fall back on, oh, Herodotus made it up because he said the Egyptians told him. But like I said, the Aztecs reference it. And there's some similarities, they said, between the Basque language in Southern Europe and the Mayan language. So, like I said, it's possible. I mean, more than likely, people built lived together, pre-Upper Dryas. So there was a civilization. And when I say advanced, when people say advanced civilization, it's always misconstrued to be like, oh, like technology, like computers, electricity, planes, all that type of stuff. When by advanced, what I mean by advanced is, like I said, division of labor, common language, communal living, and maybe a religion, So, I mean, maybe that's not a high bar, but it's the bare necessities for a civilization or society to exist. And so it's more than possible for there to have been a pre-diluvian society that was eradicated, that did spread their knowledge around the world after the Younger Dryas event, and though the reference in both the snake in the Garden of Eden and the multiple reliefs you see all over the world of the handbag of the gods, as referenced by Graham Hancock. And so, like I said, I mean, there's evidence for it. So for people to completely deny it, those are just people who refuse to, I wouldn't say have an open mind, but they learned something and they're going to stick to what they learned, and they're not open to new information, or the realization that the isolationist and Eurocentric archaeology is not only, I wouldn't say debunked, but it's completely misinformed and was presented in a disingenuous way. Like when they redated the pyramids in Mexico, a lot of them are 10,000 years old or older. So, like the dates that they give, they consistently give a younger date for artifacts outside of Europe, and give the oldest possible date for anything they find in Europe. I think it's done out of a realization that Europeans are or were the last people to be civilized. Like the Romans, when they built the walls, they didn't build them between them and the rest of the world. They built them between them and the Northern Europeans. So like I said, Atlantis more than likely probably existed, or something, or maybe they didn't call themselves Atlantis or Atlanteans, but there was some type of civilization that existed before the Upper Dryas. And I want to end it there. Namaste. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.